Fintech in Africa, opportunities in financial services. Fintech in Africa is booming, and together with our experts, we will discuss what are the challenges and opportunities in this path. I'm happy to welcome on stage our moderator, Perez, co-founder, director at Fintech Association of South Africa, who will introduce his panel. Andres, welcome. Stage is yours.
Thank you. Testing. Okay. Geez, it's a lot of accents today. That means that we have a lot of international visitors, which is good. For me, as the co-founder of Fintech Association, it's good to welcome so many international people from Europe, from different parts of the continent. My name is Andres Perez. I am the co-founder of Fintech Association of South Africa, a non-profit association led by the industry. And in essence, what we're trying to do is just put the whole industry together to address issues from a regulatory point of view, from financial inclusion, from financial literacy. So as you get into fintech, you'll understand that it's a full ecosystem, where it's a payment gateway, where it's digital, where it is cross-border payments. It's all an ecosystem, and essentially one change in one sector affects the other one. So, this is one of the best panels I've moderated. We have top industry leaders. I'm gonna let each of you introduce yourself. So please state your name, the company that you represent, and what is it exactly that you do.
Great, thanks so much, Andres. Thanks very much, everybody. Great to see some familiar faces out there. So my name is Meagan Rabe. I am from Visa. Visa is generally a brand that everyone knows, but generally what they think is, oh, it's that card, that magical brand on the corner of the card in your wallet. So we're a bit more than that. We're one of the largest companies in the world by profits, and we really just move money. When I say just, a lot of you are in the business of moving money, so you know how complicated it is. But any movement of cash, whether it's Forex, whether it's cards, whether it's payments via QR code, that's our business. And my role specifically, I am the head of FinTech management for Sub-Saharan Africa. So I've got the great privilege of making sure that fintechs can move money and operate across the 51 markets in Africa. Great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I'll go next. Paul Harris. I'm the country manager for Flutterwave, South Africa. First of all, great to see you again, Andres. He's my very good Mexican friend. We've come a long way, so well done what you've done with your career after our Ozo days. It's great to see you again. Thank you to everyone for coming. It's a lot more people than I thought there would be here. It was great to see Brian Banner again. Really enjoyed hearing his thoughts on business after sport. Having been in sport myself for a while, it's always a tricky sort of road to navigate. But great to see everyone here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, it's a great panel to be part of. So I'm Chantal Maritz. I work at PwC. So I'm a partner there. Most of you know PwC is an auditing firm, but I'm not an auditor. What I know about auditing is scary. So I'm in the strategy business. I drive our payments transformation practice. And basically what we do is we assist companies in financial services with payments, so moving money. But we've been involved in quite a few of the big transformations across the globe, and particularly in South Africa, PayShap, which you'll hear about today, as well as the PIB, setting up the PIB, and as well as digital identity. So some of these big transformations which are going to create economic growth. So very privileged to be part of it, and very exciting panel to be part of today.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mpho Sadiki. Yeah, and as everyone has said, I'm also privileged to be in this panel. It's a great panel to be in. So I'm from Banks of Africa. So Banks of Africa, many people might know it, don't know it. It's the largest clearing house in Africa. So we do payments, whether it be EFT payments, card payments, and both debit and pool. And also we have had the privilege of leading and lending Africa's, I think, truly first real-time payments instant service in South Africa called PayShap, which I'm also the leader of that. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and really engaging with all of you. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's get started. As you might know, Africa represents a lot of opportunities when it comes to fintech. Fintech is not a new term. Fintech is in every way that we live, when we pay, when we ask for a loan, when we buy airtime, when we withdraw cash, when we lend anything, all of that is fintech. So Africa has positioned themselves to be a young market full of opportunities. Like, I mean, I'm not from South Africa myself, but if I look at the markets in Europe, Latin America, Asia, they're complete different markets. And the opportunity that Africa represents for financial services, addressing financial inclusion, and more important, financial literacy is immense, right? So studies have also said that growth in fintech in Africa could reach up to 230 billion revenue by 2025, and 130 billion without or excluding South Africa. So South Africa has the most mature banking ecosystem in Africa, but it also represents a lot of different opportunities. As you know, every single country in Africa is completely different. So what works in South Africa doesn't work in Nigeria, doesn't work in Ghana. So Africa has to be taken country by country. So let's start with developments in South Africa. The one issue that we have in Africa is displacing cash. Out of 90% of transactions in Africa are cash-based. In South Africa, 9 out of 10 payments are made in cash. So in essence, cash is expensive for the economy. And as a trading platform, how do you enable people, like everyday South Africa, to make a payment, to load up the wallet and everything? So some of you might not know, but Bankster is behind all of that. So whenever you go to the ATM and withdraw, whenever you make an EFT payment, they are the guys behind that process the payment on behalf of ABSA, the clearing settlement, right? Now, we have something exciting that is called PayShap. So PayShap is looking to address that small market, that low volume, high processing, right? So, Empo, can you please explain to us about PayShap? How does it work, and what is it that you're looking to address with PayShap?
Yeah, I mean, I think the launch of PayShap this year has been an exciting time for SA payments, and just as you said, PayShap really, it's our real-time instant payment service and targeting those micropayments that we all do on an everyday basis, and mainly do them in cash, right? And as you rightly said, I think cash still dominates a lot of payments in not only in South Africa but in all markets. And when we went on this journey as an industry to say, how do we truly build a service that will not only eventually displace cash, but can truly compete with cash and has that instant gratification and really allows for people to see value in an instantaneous manner. And whether it be, and I think the trick here, it's all interbank instantaneous value realization, and that's what we've launched. So it's not a new thing in the world. I think other markets have launched real-time instant payment services, and we're hoping that we see a similar journey where the market adopts, the market really truly embraces this drive to digital payments, and they do that through the service. I think the other leg around, besides displacing cash, is that EFT in South Africa runs on very old legacy systems, which are 40-year plus in terms of age. So, a lot of payments that are driving the economy today are running on technology that is 40 years plus, right? And part of what we did with this initiative was also laying the foundations for the modernization of EFT credits in South Africa. So yes, we've launched with low-value instant payments as the first payment rail to be rolled out in that. But the future looks into rolling out other EFT credits payments into this new platform that is modernized, that runs on ISO 222 standards, and really can allow for more data, and it sort of fits into the discussion we're having today to say, with more data, how then do you incorporate fintechs? How then do you open up more participation? So yeah, I mean, let's say it's been an exciting last 18 months or 24 months for some of us that have been involved in this program, and it's great to see it live in the market and continue to grow. Yeah.
So from I like to simplify things. How do I use PayShap? Like, what is it that I do? I go into my mobile app. I see that my phone now, FNB has a thing called PayShap. Like, how does it work? And how can merchants benefit from PayShap?
So it's a journey. So I will say what we're currently experiencing is P2P payments. So I go to my banking app. I will see a PayShap logo. I've got two actions to do. So one is if I want to pay by PayShap ID, which is pay by proxy, I enable my mobile number to be the proxy for my account. And by just doing that, from then on, I can just give out my mobile number to anyone. When they pay me, money will go to the account that I've selected as my proxy. Or I can just do what I do today, which is account-to-account payment, where, through PayShap on your banking app, you just punch in the account number of the recipient and you press pay. Within 10 seconds, they receive the funds. And that's how simple it is. So what we've done is really linked proxies with account numbers, but on top of that, we're still allowing people to use account numbers to make payments. I think the idea around proxy, it's more your second question, where when we roll out person to merchants, when we roll out B2B, is that businesses can use their registered names, they can use their selected numbers as proxies, where people can just punch in the number and pay.
Awesome. Chantal, now I love reading reports, and before this I did a little bit of research. On the 2025 and beyond PwC report, you mentioned that South Africa has the potential to develop a modern payment infrastructure and cutting-edge payment platform that prioritize customers. Due to being an emerging market and burdened by a significant amount of legacy technology, with this in mind, I would like to know your opinion on whether PayShap is contributing to the enhancement of the national clearing infrastructure for low-value, high-volume payments in South Africa.
Yes, it will. And by the time when we published that report, we were already involved in PayShap, but we couldn't declare all of that. So let me maybe take a step back and give some context to that statement. Is before PayShap was known as PayShap, it was known as the Rapid Payments Program. And the reason it was called the Rapid Payments Program, it was going to shift the way we do modernization and payments in South Africa. It's to do things rapidly and to work differently. And the whole idea was for the industry to collaborate. It was about parties coming together, working together, collaborating, and making change quickly so that we can see the change quickly. And that's exactly what happened on the program. So it actually changed the way the industry is working together. So it is a different way of modernization, and we've seen that. We've seen just the way they're addressing fraud as an industry, the way they're addressing, you see it as a client as 10 seconds, as Impo was talking about, the architecture, how it's built, it's modernized, it's ISO 222. Just the way it's built is phenomenal. It's the beginning of the journey, but it is actually laying down the foundation. If you think about India and the digital stack that India is built on, India has got identity, India has got digital payments, but India has also got the changing regulation. This morning they spoke a lot about regulation, but you need these three components to work together in order to create that economic growth. And that's what South Africa needs. So with PayShap, it's actually that building block for the economy that will create this economic growth. Now you need the fintechs to form part of this, and then it will become that catalyst. So I really think PayShap is creating this foundation that will take us further.
Yeah, and I think, South Africa being at the forefront of financial services in Africa, we have examples of Kenya taking example of our national payment system. They adapted to their own market. So I think with the developments in South Africa, we expect that, out of the 55 markets in South Africa, 11 being the most advanced in tech, Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, all of them will follow to enable more citizens to participate in the digital economy, which in essence, favors everyone. As I said, it's an ecosystem. And like you say, partnerships within FinTech is probably one of the most important things. Paul, you represent one of the unicorns in Africa, Flutterwave. How many markets are you present, and how do you see the implementation of PayShap in South Africa?
Look, I think, first of all, congratulations for getting a product out there. I think that's number one, is getting something out there. I think the way the market reacts will be interesting. How you commercialize it, I think, will be an interesting one. I'm personally not in favor of charging for peer-to-peer payments. I'm sure you know that in the sort of long term, that's not going to be the plan, I'm sure. And that's been, I suppose, the one I've seen a couple of the big boys come out, and the only criticism I can give it is how to commercialize it, which I think will come with time. I think the consumers will say, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we want the payments to work. But it's certainly a step in the right direction. I think to go back to one of your previous questions is, yes, South Africa in general has got a very good banking system, but it's probably one of the most exclusive banking systems sort of ever. I think Capitec have come in and changed that slightly in the last little while by offering some competitive low-cost products. But in terms of getting cash off the streets, it's got to be, people got to work together, whether it's the regulators, the banks, the PSPs, MNOs. There's a big portion of this which doesn't often get mentioned. Data in Africa, or South Africa in particular, incredibly expensive. You go into some certain areas, outlying areas, there's no reception. I know companies like Rain, I know Paul Harris, my namesake, he's trying his hardest to change that and make it more affordable. But I think we all got to work together. I think I loved what you said earlier, getting the PSPs involved, getting the Fintechs involved in PayShap. I think that's a good way to commercialize it. It's something that we are generally quite good at, is commercializing payments, cross-border and internal. So I think working together, I think, should be the name of the game going forward, and not just your sort of new-aged payment options. Your old school, the likes of Visa, MasterCard, hugely important.
I think you just called me old.
Not you. You need the payment the card operators to be able to facilitate payments. It's not going to go away anytime soon. So working together, I think, is key.
Yeah, and I think we have to work with what we have in Africa. We have to make it work, and I think that's the beauty about Africa, is that we're resilient, and despite the economical crises, despite everything, we always find a way to make things work, right? So, let's go back to the cash, because I think the cash is a big part of how people transact and everything. Flutterwave being a company based out of Africa, how do you tackle and how do you address those markets where 90% of the transactions are cash-based? People don't have a bank account, people don't have a credit debit card. There is different option payments. As a payment gateway, how do you tackle that 90%, or are you just addressing that 10%?
Slowly. To answer that question honestly, I think it's not something where you click your fingers and there's a silver bullet and all of a sudden all the cash is off the streets. It's a learned behavior. Some people don't have options. It is the way that they've been paying. There's big trust issues. Payments is all about trust and trusting platforms. I think there's trust issues in Africa when it comes to payment. There's educational issues when it comes to payments in Africa. India was a great example. They had the same thing for a long period of time, but I think a way more educated population when it comes to payments. Their data is a lot cheaper. I've been fortunate to travel India quite a bit, and it's incredibly cheap and quick, and data is easy to get. There's many options. So I think that's a big driver. For us at Flutterwave, what we try and do is offer options. Wherever we go in country, one API, integrate once as a merchant, and you get many options, whether that's point of sale in certain areas, whether it's wallet, whether it's vouchering, whether it's bank to bank, whether it's normal card acquiring payments. Offer everything, give everyone the option. I think we'll find ways with the banks, with the regulators, to get cash off. The big issue with cash throughout Africa is cash handling fees. It's very expensive to handle, to use cash. We all know you go to an ATM, you withdraw cash out of your own bank account, and what do they want to do? They want to charge you for that. So you want to deposit cash, what do they want to do? They want to charge you for it. Yes, the retailers are helping. In Africa, you've got your big retailers that are helping try and drive those costs down. But somewhere, someone's got to pay for it. And I think that's where we've got to start getting a bit more smart, start working together with the regulators. You've seen countries like Nigeria with NIBS, where the regulator has come in and tried to change, although there's been a few issues with NIBS in the sort of recent past. But finding ways to work with the regulator, working with the banks, as I said, to make it easier to get cash off the streets and to make it easier for people to make payments, especially the ones that are in the outlying areas or the poorer communities.
Chantal, I like your title, A Strategy in Payment Transformation. Payments transformation is digitalizing cash, enabling more people to participate in the economic, right? So, how does the increase from cash-based transactions to digital transactions present opportunities for financial innovation and economic growth in low and medium income countries like South Africa, Kenya, and Ghana?
So if you think about it, the fundamental of it is that in the countries, you have to look at the spending habits of the people. And we've done a study, and I'm sure you also looked at that study, that people are cash-based. And they also need to look at where the trust lies, as you mentioned. And what we found is that trust does lie in the banking system. So people do trust banks because this is where they've been taught. You know, it goes to your point also around education. So people trust banks. They know this is where we need to rely and put our money and all of that. But the fundamental point goes to education. You need to educate people, but in digitization, it also feeds into the whole point around security, fraud, security, and driving that element. And what we've also realized is one of the key elements you also need to address is you need to realize, as mentioned in the earlier discussion, things don't work in one country like it does in another country. South Africa is very, very different. It's not regulatory driven in South Africa. South Africa, the regulators actually create space for everyone to innovate. They monitor and wait for you to do what you need to do. And that's why in South Africa, it's very important for the banks and the other markets to actually collaborate and come up with ideas. The big thing in South Africa, what we found in that study, is that the retailers are actually trusted a lot more. In Kenya, we saw that it was the MNOs, and in Nigeria, it was the big tech companies. So what we need to realize is there's lots of opportunity for everyone to come together and to actually create this opportunity, which then says, okay, we can address digitization, we can address the cash in the economy, and we can actually save the economy from that perspective. So I think when we look at all of these elements together, we will realize there are fundamental societal problems that we need to address as big corporations, and what are we going to do to come together to look at that? Because if we try and address it individually, we're not going to do it. And that's one of the things we realized when we were on the PayShap journey, because there were individual problems being addressed by, for example, the Banking Association, by the Payments Association, by the Reserve Bank. But when you collaborate as an industry, you've got the collective power of everyone coming together and addressing topics like digital transformation or cashless economies. Where you see in countries like India or Thailand, they had national imperatives to address an agenda. We don't have that in South Africa. So we rather have to be self-starting and address it at that level. And with a lot of people leaving the country, seeing energy crisis and all those kind of things, people run away. So we have to be the self-starters and say, what are we going to do about it, and address it in that manner.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it, a big point when it comes to the large players participating, the likes of a Visa, the likes of a banks. One thing when I started Fintech Association, I heard the point from the banks, I heard the point from the regulators, I heard the point from the fintechs, and they're all like trying to push one way, the other way wants to do this, the other way wants to do that. But I think we have, all of us have identified that the fight is not between banks, fintechs, and regulators, but the fight is against digitalizing cash. The fight is against cash. Cash is expensive. Cash enables, like money laundering, all of these. So, like, how do we create an ecosystem that is more, let's call it collaborative? And this is now to Visa. So, we all know that Visa has a fast-track program. It has grown over 360% year on year, which the aim is to enable the next generation of fintechs to rebuild the global economy by providing resources, tools, certification programs, etc. I always like partnerships. So from you, I want you to please share a couple of insights, a couple of test cases of what Visa has done to enable these partnerships. How has Visa paved the way for some fintechs to build products that will enable to decash society?
Great, thanks very much. So just touching on what all my colleagues on the panel have spoken about is collaboration. This collaboration is absolutely key. So the first point in terms of enabling fintechs is actually understanding the ecosystem. Now, operating in sub-Saharan Africa, the ecosystem is vastly different. In some countries, you can go and receive a deposit with a Visa principal license. In other countries, you need to partner with a bank, and you have to have a bank sponsor to be able to receive those deposits. So what we at Visa are doing, and it's I live, breathe, sleep, and eat this, is building this ecosystem play. So this is going from country to country, identifying the regulations, and then identifying, okay, in this country we need a BIN sponsor. So I'm going to go and then partner with all the banks. We take it upon ourselves to then educate the banks in terms of how do you make this profitable for you, and how do you price it so that it's profitable still for the fintech. Because a lot of the problems that I do is I meet fintechs that are very excited and they want to launch, and we put card programs out or we put digital payment programs out, and then 6 months down the line they come to me and say, but I'm not profitable because the banks are taking X, I'm paying processors systems Y, and Visa's costs are an X. So it's very important to understand this ecosystem. So to answer the question in terms of specific examples, we've got a fintech, for example, in Nigeria called Thrive Afric. And Thrive Afric, they provide payment solutions in the farming ecosystem, really from a grassroots farmer all the way to the retailers and the multinationals. And it was really understanding the pain points along this finance journey and digitalizing that. And what we do as Visa is we literally say, okay, for the local payments, we're not going to worry about cards. We're going to look at QR codes. A lot of that is existing. USD works in that specific market. And then as we move up to the cross-border, when the agricultural product is moving out of the country, obviously there's specific pain points, specifically in Nigeria, around Forex. And then we said, let's use Visa Direct Rails to move that money out. So that's just one example about how we're working. So I urge you, if you've got questions on this, to please chat to me afterwards, because if you're specifically working in South Africa, it's a very different narrative to working in Botswana and how to navigate that ecosystem.
Okay, so let's talk opportunities. I think that we all have identified that there is plenty of opportunities in South Africa. 60% of the market in South Africa is still unbanked or underbanked. That represents an opportunity if you're an entrepreneur, if you have an idea and how to do all of this, right? Internet cost is still not cheap, but we're getting there. It has come down year to year. That represents another opportunity. Mobile penetration in Africa is also quite high. I think it's sitting at 75% now. South Africa has one of the highest at 96%. So all of these play a key factor in what is coming next, right? So now we see blockchain, cryptocurrencies, we see the development of AI, ChatGPT, all of those. And this is an open question for all of you who have, I think, more than 60, 70 years combined experience in payments and, so what is next? Where do you see the next big thing happening? And then where do you see opportunity within FinTech?
I'm happy to go first. So a big trend in Europe is all around open banking. I was chatting to somebody outside earlier and he asked me, but what is open banking? So I said to him, I'm showing my age now. So remember the good old days when on Friday afternoons you listened to the radio for the top 10 music, and you sat with your recorder and you were ready to click record when your best song was coming on. I see some nods next to me. Some of you that are younger will think, no, I walked into a CD store and I had to buy a whole CD to get my one favorite song. And then streaming happened, and now I can get whatever I want, what song, when I want it. Now, open banking is the streaming for the finance sector. So just imagine a world where APIs are shared. Flutterwave now wants to move into the lending space in South Africa. All the credit history, etc., is sitting on credit bureaus, which you're privileged enough to get information if the bank shares it. Imagine if I wanted to apply on Flutterwave for a loan, I can pull all of your lending data with your consent, Another example, imagine doing supplier onboarding. So some of you have probably gone through this where you're being onboarded in a large entity or government, and you have to supply them with almost every single financial document plus your blood type. That all information at the push of a button is available. So a big trend that we're seeing in Europe, Visa's got a product called Tink, T-I-N-C, and what Tink does is across Europe pulls through 3,500 banking data points into these single APIs that are then consumable by fintechs. So we really see this as the next big thing for Africa. But as per Chantal's point, the big challenge is if you've got the banks, what's in it for them to be able to move this forward? And if the regulators aren't going to push it, how is it going to be driven? So it has to be driven by us. It has to be driven by the fintech associations and all the entities that operate within that ecosystem. Thanks.
If I may just add to that, I think that the big disruptions come in cross-border. I think we're sort of getting an idea of how to do payments within a country, but cross-border in Africa is still a massive issue. It's actually easier to transfer money from the US into an African country than into Africa. It's actually ridiculous. It's embarrassing. We're also charging ridiculous fees. You've got migrant workers coming across, let's take South Africa for example. Migrant workers coming into SA, sometimes getting charged 10% to move money cross-border. There's got to be better ways of doing this, and agreed. Regulators need to step up. We need to understand the issues we have in Africa. We understand that we are all African, and make payments a lot easier cross-border. I think that's where the big disruption's coming. I think everywhere you look around here, I think 70% of the stands are some sort of cross-border FX provider. So you see the need's definitely there. I think that's where disruption's coming, and it's going to come soon. I think other like Europe, the US, they've kind of got it right. Not quite, but they're getting there. They're leaps and bounds ahead of what we are in Africa, and that's the one area where I think disruption's coming, and it's coming soon.
So I'm going to apply a practical lens. I think it's the PIB and the RPP or PayShap hats that I'm wearing the past 5 years. But in 2019, when we went on the study tour and we looked at all these countries and their advanced tech and everything that they did, and we came back and we said, we're going to do this in South Africa, and now 2023 we did it. There were so many things that they did, and we said we really need to apply that here. And when the journey to get here was long, and we said in 2019, all the fintechs are going to be part of the launch, they're not. And the regulation hasn't changed yet. On the PIB journey, it was quite a grueling journey, as many of you know, but it was about how we're going to open up the system. If I reflect on the SARB's 2025 vision and how they want interoperability, how they want to increase competition, how they want to address financial inclusion, those are the goals we need to address. So we need to be practical. Yes, there's fantastic tech and things that we need to address, but we need to get the fundamentals right first, and we need to open up competition. So I really think with the coffee bill and everything coming into play, that's important, and we need to get more players involved, because we're never going to get the scale of PayShap realized if we don't get more players involved. If the regulation doesn't change, then we're not going to get interoperability. So I think those fundamentals need to be in place in order for this to scale. So I want to see those changes come into play.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that. I think what you shared is quite right, in that we as a country, we're quite unique. So I look back a number of years back because I think the point's made around whether do we need regulation or do we need collaboration or competition. I look back to where forced regulation didn't achieve the desired results. So for many of you who've been in banking for a long time, you'll remember them Zanzi days, right? Where we're trying to force financial inclusion, and that didn't have the right desired results, right? And so my sense is, I think what's exciting with the coming years in South Africa is that you will have a little bit of regulation, but I think the approach from a regulatory point of view has changed a bit, as in it's no longer enforcement, but it's about creating the ecosystem for collaboration to happen, for co-creation to happen between the financial institutions, the fintech players, and also the telco players. Because ultimately, I think for payments to thrive, whether it be local or cross-border, you do need that active collaboration between the key players in the ecosystem. I don't necessarily believe that you need, especially for South Africa, that you need forced regulation, because we've seen that that doesn't work. You need enabling regulation that allows for partners to engage, that allows for innovation to happen, and for innovation to happen at the customer level. And I made a point a few weeks back when I was engaging with one colleague within the fintech space, and I spoke about the role that each of the players in the payments ecosystem play. And I think in my experience, and Paul, you shared that a bit in your point, is that I think what also excites me in the future is that fintechs are going to lead in that forefront of customer experience, of customer innovation. And I think that's where we also need to think and invest a lot of effort and creativity on. It's around customer experience and customer innovation within the whole payments ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, so as you see, it's a full ecosystem. We have banks there, we have PwC, we have payment gateway, Flutterwave, we have Visa, and you can catch the importance of all these industry players coming together to enable that South African to make a payment, to go and buy a voucher, to make a payment via credit card, debit card. Most of you are part of FX trading companies. It is good if you have your platform and you have all these things like people trading and whatever, but if people can't put money into the wallets, if they can't get a payout, your platform sort of like doesn't mean anything because they can't do anything with it. So it is important that you are informed of what is going on in the ecosystem, things like PayShap, things like PIB. I'm speaking in the context of South Africa, because all of these changes in regulation, in innovation, will essentially affect your business, your revenues. You're gonna end up paying more money for processing. Your revenues are gonna shrink. So my advice for you is to inform yourself in what is going on within the fintech industry. You don't have to be an expert, just understand how it works. Okay, so let's open the stage for some questions. We have the FSCA, so go for it.
Thank you. My name is Narazi. I have two questions, and I'll try to keep them short. So my first question is, as we're discussing fintechs in Africa,
I can't hear you.
Sorry?
Can't hear you.
Oh, thank you. A study was conducted by the University of Pretoria last year, where they found that the more fintechs are active, they contribute to more climate change negative impacts. So how will the fintechs, as you're discussing now, fintech in Africa, opportunities in financial services, as they contributed to increasing financial inclusion, and that was their study towards increasing financial inclusion, work towards not affecting climate change, which is where we find that Africa is affected the most, even though they're producing the least amount of greenhouse gases. And then my second question is regarding PayShap, where in Australia, when PayID was put into the market, there was more unity and more marketing per se to make sure that the public was more aware. Whereas with PayShap, there hasn't been so much of the same publication, and you see that people don't know as much about it. I could use myself as an example. I'm very financially literate. I have multiple bank accounts, but it took me a while to get to know what PayShap was about. So what endeavors can you make to get more people aware about it, so that we find that more people are using it instead of still using the immediate payment option that banks have, which is more expensive? Thank you.
So I can quickly pick up that last one. I think it talks back to the point Paul raised to say, of course, adoption and take-up does take time. We do have an extensive marketing program that we're running as a program to educate customers on the various concepts around PayShap. But again, it's going to require more than just what we do. It's going to require a collaborative effort across all industry players to ensure that those customers in the corners of South Africa are reached. So, and I think that's the journey we are going to go through. We've only been live for a good 12 weeks, so that will continue. So I think do look out to a lot of activations that we'll be doing in the market over the next coming months. Yeah.
I'm happy to give a shot to the first question. So interestingly, with Visa, the data that we're seeing is a number of fintechs are actually largely driven by Gen Z and millennials. And with that usage and uptake, a lot of the Gen Zs are very prominent in terms of making sure that the businesses that they engage with are green, etc. So what Visa does every year is we run a competition called Visa Everywhere, where it's the most innovative fintechs can come and apply to this competition, and it's a global competition. South Africa is running at the moment. And part of that is actually there's a very strong green element which we're coming through from a consumer perspective to make use of. So I think it's largely consumer driven.
Yeah, just touching base on the climate tech. Climate tech in financial services is mainly driven by insurance. If we put the case of South Africa, 65% of people who are insuring South Africa are insured by funeral cover. They're not insured by home, or they're not insured for a flood or any of that. What we're doing as an industry is to go to those lending companies that already has a system in place to say, like, how about you tackling lending for solar? How about you kind of like adjust your model to address those climate changes we see, like in townships where there is a fire and all of a sudden everybody loses everything. My thing is, like, why are you paying for funeral cover where you could be paying for some sort of insurance where you can insure your home and all of those? So I think as an industry we are trying to promote those kind of things to industry participants that might not be aware of the opportunity that this lies.
Hello, my name is Ntabiseng. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a mobile wallet called Wakotenga. So we have about 350,000 clients from taxis to sponsor shops, but the problem is the regulations. So we need a sponsoring bank, number one, and we want to launch in September. But because we don't have a sponsoring bank and we've been shopping around, but the problem with its pricing, and the fact that some of the banks want us to give them access to our data, which we all know data is like gold nowadays. So that's one of the questions that we have for you, Andres, is that as an association, what are you doing to help guys like us to also become players? And secondly, is that there are a lot of, fintechs, but problem is none of those fintechs have actually, made an impact because of regulations. So what is it that can be done to help? Because right now we've got two options, is that we either go for a sponsoring bank, and we know that banks also have their own wallets. So it's kind of like, going to your competitor and asking, for a handout, or go on and get a banking license, which is about R250 million, which obviously it's impossible for us to afford. And then another question is for Visa, is what are opportunities that I can, access as a fintech? And Flutterwave, after launching, what we want to do is to go to Zimbabwe. We've done, an extensive research, and we found that they transact about 150 billion rands from, Zimbabweans who are working around to support their families back in Zimbabwe, and we thought it could be a good market for us to also infiltrate. So in terms of ourselves, what are partnerships that we can also access? Thank you. Oh, sorry, the last question from Mpo. I'm so sorry. Okay, so I know about PayShap. I've done my research, and I've also called to say, when can we access PayShap? And unfortunately, they said, no, we can't. If you want to access it, we have to go through the bank that we're banking with. So maybe can you explain a little bit more about that? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start briefly because we just ran out of time. So what you're saying falls under the national payment system, which is kind of like an old kind of regulation. And this is what Chantal was addressing, is something called the payment industry body, which is looking to enable more of those industry participants to have a voice when it comes to bankings and all of that. The issue that you have around TPP sponsorship, around any sort of a sponsorship, is the same issue that every single fintech in South Africa is going for. The South Africa Reserve Bank is aware, the FSCA is aware, the NCR is aware, the IFWG is aware. So essentially what the PIB is looking to do is to address those issues. I mean, we ran out of time, but I'm more than happy to just explain to you a little bit more of like what is getting done. But don't worry, I feel you.
And then in terms of the visa question, first of all, I love your passion. I love that you try to get 6 questions in there with your one. I want to talk to you afterwards. So in terms of visa, so you can go onto visa.com and you'll see under the business tab, there's Fintech. So you can go into the Fintech Fast Track program that Andreas was talking about. And in there, once you've registered, so it's a simple online registration, and you've got access to over 91 open APIs in terms of traditional payments, digital payments, QR payments, etc. So it's really built for your own developers to access. It's our own self-help, very easy to understand. So please do go check out the website. It's very beneficial.
Just one thing to add, I'll chat to you afterwards if you'd like. Ran my own wallet in my previous life. If you want help with the sponsor bin, come give me a shout. I'll try and see if I can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I think I'm just worried about time, but it's all linked to what Andreas has said. So because this is, of course, account-to-account funds transfer, you are into the realm of sponsorship, and the technology itself is built with the future in mind, very much in the PIB world that says access will not only be limited to banks, it will be expanded to other non-banks to participate. So it just so happened that we've landed ahead of the actual regulatory changes happening to enable participation. So in the interim, participation is through a sponsoring bank who will then host your wallet or your store of value, and I enabled it to be able to receive and also send funds across. But over time, as PIB matures, you will get then to have direct participation to the PayShap scheme. Yeah, cool. Hopefully that helps. Yeah.
I think that's it for all. If I can get a round of applause for our speakers.